This year, Hawthorne Credit Union turned 75 years old. 75. Can you believe that? You might be wondering how it all got started. We'll sit back and let Aunt Kate tell you a story. Once upon a time, back in the 1900s, Once upon a time, back in the early 1900s, there was an innovative Boston store owner named Edward Filing. Ever heard of Filing's Basement? That's him. Edward Filing really cared for his co-workers. In fact, he was a leader in employee benefit programs, which were unheard of at the time. He hated seeing his hard-working employees struggle, and he wanted to help them. One of the benefits he provided was a financial cooperative he heard of. It was called a credit union, a place where working people would pool their money together, however little they had, and make loans to each other to help each other out during tough times. By the early 1930s, the Great Depression was in full swing. Record number of people across the country were unemployed. Food and housing, basic stuff, was expensive, and average working people were struggling big time. Does this sound familiar? Back then, there was no such thing as credit for consumers either. You can imagine how Filing's credit union idea would be a hit during the Depression. So he and another credit union pioneer, Roy Bergengren, took the idea straight to the top. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States. FDR was also very interested in helping working people. In 1934, President Roosevelt signed the Federal Credit Union Act, which created a way for more credit unions to form across the U.S. Well, right here in Cicero, Illinois, just outside Chicago, things were no different. Western Electric had a big plant called Hawthorne Works Plant that was the major employer. They made telephones and phone wires that were used across the country. In those days, if you lived in Cicero, you either worked for the Hawthorne Work Plant or a supplier to the Hawthorne Work Plant. But during the Depression, Western Electric had to lay off most of their workforce too. Times were tough. People were broke. There were no banks willing to make loans to average working people. If you needed a loan shark from another local business was your only option. This bothered Sen Heath, an employee of the Hawthorne Work Plant. He hated seeing his co-workers, neighbors, and friends suffer. He heard about this wonderful thing called a credit union, and so he wrote to Edward Filing about setting up a credit union. In May of 1935, Hawthorne Credit Union was inducted into the National Credit Union Association. Employees became members of the credit union by buying a share for just 25 cents. And every payday, the members put 25 cents into their savings account from their paychecks. And when they needed money, they borrowed from each other. Small loans were made like $25, which was a lot of money back then. Hawthorne grew from just a handful of members to over 12,000. And today, Hawthorne works the same way. With the $5 membership share, you could become a member of a Hawthorne Credit Union too. And the members lived happily ever after.